Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, April 17th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, journalist David Dayen. On the most powerful staffer in Congress who is not on your side. Also on the program today, Jeff Sessions gone but not forgotten. Attorney General Bill Barr seeks to end bail for officially credible asylum seekers. Meanwhile, Donald Trump vetoes a bill to end U.S. involvement in the Yemen war, his second veto. The first act of Congress in a long time to end our involvement in a war. Meanwhile, Republicans are blocking the tightening of vaccine laws across the country as we have various outbreaks of diseases because of anti-vaxxers. White House seeks to fuel a constitutional crisis over congressional subpoenas and breaking a $200 billion revenue per year insurance company is against Medicare for all. The Natural History Museum cancels its fascist exhibit by disinviting Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro.
Dave Rubin's dumb.
Same-sex partners much more likely to be denied loans, study finds, and Israel deports a human rights worker via their anti-boycott law. All this and more on today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Wednesday, April 17th. We are rushing headlong into what I anticipate will be one of the least relaxing vacations I've had in the history of all the vacations I've ever had. We're just, in fact, tomorrow will be our final day. As you know, Passover starts Friday night, and I will be traveling with my children to visit relatives for Passover, and then later in the week, I'm going to take them solo to Florida. And
Oi
is right. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to try and entertain a 6-year-old and a 13-year-old simultaneously over the course of 5 or 6 days, but that is virtually impossible. So cannot wait to get back. And, of course, the Mueller report will come out probably about an hour after we start vacation, which is usually the way it is. I anticipate a lot more news happening over the next week and a half. I'm going to do my best to get on YouTube Live over the course of the week if there are breaking stories. I'm going to do my best, and it's going to involve a certain amount of patience for my kids and patience, frankly, from you, because there could be opportunities for you to see my children as they demand things from me over the course of that week. But we will get to that. Also, I want to just do one update on a story that we had covered in Vegas. I interviewed a woman who had who was running an organization, was seeking to her last name escapes me already, to extend Bridie Farrell. And Bridie Farrell has been working on an organization called New York Loves Kids, which was advocating for the passage of the Child Victims Act in New York State. Prior to, I think it was signed maybe weeks ago, the statute of limitations in New York State, if you were sexually assaulted as a child, was somewhere around age 30 or so. If you were, was 23 for both civil and criminal punishment. So if you turned 23 without bringing a case against the adult that assaulted you when you were a child, you had no other opportunity. Now, that's absurd. Anyone who was a victim of any type of sexual assault will immediately understand how difficult it is for people to bring charges, just broadly speaking, but never mind a child, and to even become sort of able to process the whole thing by the time you're age 23 is, I don't want to say virtually impossible, but extremely difficult. And for 10 or 11 years, this organization has been attempting to push this legislation. But because of the Republican dominance, I shouldn't say dominance, but because Republicans owned the Senate, largely because of the IDC, for years, that bill could not pass, which would extend the length of the statute of limitations. And when the IDC was defeated last year, this bill progressed through the New York Assembly and Senate and was signed by Andrew Cuomo. It is now the law of New York State. Now you have until age, I think it's 35 or so, to file criminal charges. If you're assaulted from February of this year on as a child, you have till age 35 or so to file criminal charges, and I think 52 to bring civil charges. There is also a 1-year grandfather for people who were sexually assaulted as a child and the statute of limitations had run out. There's a 1-year period, which I believe started maybe March 1st, where they can file charges. The update is a new victim has gone public in the Jeffrey Epstein case, filing a sworn affidavit in federal court in New York Tuesday saying that she was sexually assaulted and her then 15-year-old sister molested by Epstein and his companion, Ghislaine Maxwell, in 1996. And I suspect that this is happening because of that law. I'm not 100% sure of it, but I believe so. The assault, I don't know if it took, she reported her assault to New York police in 1996. Documents released April 1st make reference to Farmer having been interviewed in 2006, 2007. Farmer, now 49, said the FBI did not take any action against Epstein and Maxwell. So the statute of limitations, I think in this case are already having an impact. So just to give you an update on the implications, I don't know that we ever mentioned when we said defeat the IDC in New York State, whatever it was, a year ago, that anybody had contemplated this. But that's one of the implications of defeating the IDC and having Democrats control all branches of government in New York State. We will see others too around the country Republicans are blocking tightening of vaccination laws because at the end of the day, they're a little bit more anti-vaxxer than perhaps on the left. Certainly within certainly the Republican Party reflects its most marginal views on the right more so than the Democrats do. That's just the bottom line.
Could there be some financial ties there as well?
It's conceivable, but I don't know what they would be. I mean,
true.
I don't know how that would work out. I mean, certainly the drug companies want there to be more vaccinations. And I don't think that we're at a point where the opting out of vaccinations is costing the drug companies a sufficient amount. They buy the immunizations from the U.S. government purchases the immunizations. I would imagine hospitals, they all buy probably the exact same amount. But it
They're
doesn't
in bed with big wellness.
Right, exactly. It doesn't make, it doesn't just, I don't think economically it makes that much of a difference, the anti-vaxxing movement at this point, in terms of the bottom line for the vaccination makers. But it only takes a few anti-vaxxers to begin to undercut the effectiveness of the of herd immunity, as they call it.
Oh, yeah. I looked that up the other day because apparently there is a measles outbreak in South Williamsburg.
That's
and
right.
I go through there on the subway on my way to work.
Because of the, I think it's the Hasidic community, there is a significant number of anti-vaxxers in that community, and it's highly problematic. That's why we heard a couple of weeks ago, there was one up in Rockland County as well, outbreak. And that was also from an Orthodox community up there, and it must have traveled down.
Are there religious reasons for that, or is that autism paranoia?
I don't know. I'm not aware of any religious reasons why that would be the case.
I got a very concerned phone call from my mom about it.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm sure you're vaccinated, but I don't know what the efficacy of a vaccination is. I think it's pretty close to 100%. But the issue is if you have a compromised immunity system, immune system, or if you are particularly old or particularly young, can be problematic.
Yeah, I looked this up actually. They say that if you know you've been exposed to it as an adult, even if you were vaccinated as a kid, you're supposed to get a booster.
Ooh, I didn't know that. Folks, the problem that keeps so many businesses from knowing their numbers is their hodgepodge of business systems. Oh, God, do I know this. We have a legacy system on our membership. And fans. Fans is great. The legacy system, not so great. But migrating people over, it's very difficult. They have one system for accounting, another for sales, another for inventory, and so on. It's just a big, inefficient mess that takes up too much time and too many resources, and that hurts the bottom line. Introducing NetSuite by Oracle. It's the business management software that handles every aspect of your business in an easy-to-use cloud platform that gives you the visibility and control you need to grow. With NetSuite, you save time, money, and unneeded headaches. Those are all things that I would love to save. By managing sales, finance, accounting, orders, and HR instantly right from your desktop or phone. That's why NetSuite is the world's #1 cloud business system. And right now, NetSuite is offering you valuable insights with a free guide. 7 key strategies to grow your profits, Michael.
Sweet. Crush.
The comma Michael part I made up. At netsuite.com/majority. That's netsuite.com/majority to download your free guide, 7 key strategies to grow your profits. netsuite.com/majority. Also today, the Majority Report being supported by, in part at least, by Simple Habit. You've heard me talk about Simple Habit. It's a mobile app that provides a massive and diverse library of 5-minute guided meditations. And the Majority Report audience can try Simple Habit totally free for an entire week when you go to simplehabit.com/majority. There's a lot of evidence that touts the benefits of meditating, both anecdotal and, frankly, data. It's true. I've had just about every therapist I've been to, and even my doctors now, or my physical doctors, are saying, you really think about it.
Even them, they're just like, Jesus Christ, dude.
Yeah.
Sit down.
They have guided meditations for mindfulness, meditations for anxiety, for depression, for when you're having trouble falling asleep, meditations for when you're wanting to overcome procrastination, or for when you have something important going on at work. They have meditations designed for parents, so you can deal with your children. They have meditations made specifically for when you're waking up or your lunch break, any time of the day. As you know, different people meditate for different reasons. Simple Habit is able to cater to just about anyone, regardless of what their goals are with meditation, how much past experience they have with meditation, how intimidated they are by meditating. It's the variety of guided meditations on Simple Habit is what sets it apart, and that's why Simple Habit won the 2018 Google Play Award for Best Wellbeing App. It's available on iOS, Android, and web browser, and the Majority Report audience can try it for free for a week by going to simplehabit.com/majority. If you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening by the podcast, look in the show description, I guess below. I don't know how you do that with audio, but below the player, and we have a link there. All right, let's, apropos of our guest who's coming on in just a moment, to talk about a guy named Wendell Primus, who may very well be one of the largest impediments to Medicare for all in the Congress today. The Republican Party is a big part of it. Now, I guess maybe I should say the House. But here is Fox News doing triage. I am quite convinced that this segment would not have happened but for really from the Fox News perspective, from the president's perspective, from the perspective of anyone who was against single-payer health care, from the perspective of people who are desperate to not have Bernie Sanders be the Democratic nominee and potentially the president of the United States. From all of those people's perspective, the Fox Town Hall was a bit of a disaster for them. Now, there's a little bit of controversy about Bernie and Andrew Yang, and I think Buttigieg is going on. Buttigieg is going on shortly. About 10 years ago, there was a concerted effort to convince Democratic politicians not to go on Fox because you did not want to validate their propaganda operation as some type of news organization. But there was a feeling that if you were to go on, you want to undercut their message. And very few people are capable of doing it. That guy, Bregman, who he had on, Rutger Bregman, did it very well. Of course, he ended up getting bumped, but was able to release the stuff. You want more examples of Donald Trump having, issues with what happened on Fox. At first, he was sort of like, and then it started to seep in that it was really problematic for him. And he was on Twitter raging last night. Many Trump fans and signs were outside of the Fox News studios last night and now thriving. Thank you, President Trump, speaking to himself. Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, for the interview with crazy Bernie Sanders. Big complaints about not being let in, stuff with Bernie supporters. What's with Fox News? I believe it'll be crazy Bernie Sanders versus the sleepy Joe Biden as the two finalists to run against the best economy in the history of our country and many other great things. I look forward to facing whoever it may. May God rest their soul.
Wow.
Whoa.
Is that his name for Joe Biden now? Sleepy
Wait,
Joe?
is that a death threat?
No, he's just saying, may God rest their soul.
Yeah,
I don't
just
think
a debate.
I'm just throwing stuff out there.
It's just a
He
debate.
hopes
Okay.
they get a good night's
It's just
sleep.
my
So,
words, man.
Fox is in triage.
It's like,
Over
it's not
single,
enough that they're
so
full
they literally,
propagandists. They need emotional care for him as well.
and the White House must be aware of this. I mean, this is an all hands on deck moment when you send at this stage right now, because you want to this is not when they wanted to roll her out. The Trump appointed bureaucrat in charge of Medicare and Medicaid in the Trump administration And they're bringing her out. Now, this is way early for this. Way early. Much earlier than you would have wanted to. And they actually sit her down with Kilmeade, Brian Kilmeade, right?
They're Medicare experts.
Yeah, they're Medicare expert.
I know
Seema
so
Verma
much.
is the administrator for Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Administrator Seema Verma, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So all this talk about Medicare for all really hits your office specifically. Can that work?
Well, I've been saying that Medicare for all is the biggest threat to the American healthcare system. What we're talking about is stripping people of their private health insurance, forcing them into a government-run program. So this is a bureaucracy that's going to be making decisions about everybody's health care, what kind of benefits that they can have, what kind of medications that they can have access to. And if we look at other socialized countries that have tried this approach, what do we see there? Long wait times, poor quality health care, and that's why those people are flying to the United States to get their health care.
But people say, wow, I'm a senior, I like that. I like Medicare, it's working for me. So why not give it to everybody?
Well, look, as the head of the program, I can tell you that Medicare is a sacred promise that we have made to the American people. They have paid their entire lives into this program. And now we're talking about putting millions of people into a program that was designed specifically for them.
Right.
And what that's going to mean is that they're going to have to compete to get care. That's putting them in line for their care. And I don't think that's fair. And the reality is we're having problems today paying for the Medicare program. And the trustees have warned about the solvency. So just adding more people to the program is just going to exacerbate it.
Right. This is roughly what his plan looks like. Let's just
Pause it for 1 second. It will exacerbate it if there is no more funding. But no one has proposed no more funding. Obviously, if anything, it will expand the services for Medicare, and it will put it on more solid financial footing because of the dedicated resources to the entire program.
And exacerbate it.
Right. This is roughly what his plan looks like. Let's just take a full screen of this. Transition U.S. to a single-payer system over 4 years. No premiums, deductibles, only minimal co-pays. Cost estimate $28 to $32 trillion. And he claims that $28,000 is now spent for a family of four for health care. And that $32 trillion will be over 10 years. How does that look?
Well, essentially what this is he's saying we're going to essentially just move all of these costs to the government. But that just means higher and massive taxes for the American people.
Well, again, it is, yes, higher taxes. And Bernie already led with that. So they're really having a tough time figuring this out. Now, Donald Trump was reported the other day is spending a ton of money on Facebook ads geared towards old folks on Facebook. And this is going to be what they're going to try and motivate. They're going to say that Medicare for all is going to ruin your Medicare. Now, Seema Verma, of course, was formerly a healthcare consultant to states, teaching them how to get around Medicaid implementation and how to set it up in such a way that you could get a waiver from the government, so that you could actually continue to increase the profits of private insurance. Invisible to the public, wrote the Indy Star. Vima's work has included the design of the Healthy Indiana Plan, a consumer-driven insurance program for low-income Hoosiers that's now being touted nationally as an alternative to Obamacare. In all, Vima and her small consulting firm has received more than $3.5 million in state contracts. At the same time, Vima has worked for one of the state's largest Medicaid vendors, a division of Silicon Valley, Dayen Hewlett-Packard. That company agreed to pay Vima more than $1 million and has landed more than $500 million in state contracts. Imagine that. Synergy. During your tenure as Indiana's go-to healthcare consultant, I wonder who it was that brought her to the White House. Mike Pence. And because, you know why? Because she understands how you can both make money and make money as long as you're taking it from both that's what is known as a public-private partnership. And it all ends up in her pocket.
The problem with bureaucrats is they can't take a cut like that.
That's right. But I'm sure it's going to enhance her consulting business when she's done with this. All right, folks, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, David Dayen. You're back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest has written for every major worthwhile publication in the country. If he has not, then you know it is not a worthwhile publication. He is also, ladies and gentlemen, David Dayen. David, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
And
Thank
not only
you.
that.
Why are you so late?
I know.
No.
I know. I was late. I apologize. I was trying to set up this piece. But I should also say, author of Chain of Title, which some consider one of the best books on the mortgage crisis that is out there. So if you want to know, if you have not read Chain of Title, you don't know about the mortgage crisis, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
And I should also say, this is public knowledge, right? I mean,
yes,
that David Dayen is just weeks away of officially taking the title of what? Editor-in-Chief?
Executive editor of The American Prospect, available on the web at prospect.org.
This is very exciting. I'm very excited about it. Long overdue. I mean, not necessarily with the American Prospect, but it was long overdue for you to get a role like this. But so, David, let's talk about the piece that you wrote in The Intercept last week about Wendell Primus. Wendell Primus first came to my attention, I think, well, maybe I had heard his name a while back, but most recently he was caught on tape basically telling a room full of insurers, don't worry about Medicare for all.
Yeah. In fact, this is almost kind of a road show that he has done, not just to insurance lobbyists, but to healthcare researchers. I found a very obscure video of him at a healthcare conference in Irvine, California, where he was making the same points, essentially downplaying Medicare for All, saying the House leadership, the Democratic leadership, would not support it, that they would go instead to try to make improvements to the Affordable Care Act. And this is one of sort of many areas in which Primus, who is the lead health policy advisor to Nancy Pelosi, is one of many areas where he has differed with progressives on these issues.
And that was, that is why we're talking about him, is because of his central role in the, and we don't have.
I think we're talking about him. I think we're talking about him because it's spilled into public view. I mean, you don't normally hear about a staffer in Congress. I mean, that's very unusual that a member of Congress would refer to a staffer by name and in a pejorative sense, and saying that they oppose this staffer's ideas. I mean, that just doesn't happen. But Wendell Primus, who has been around for quite a long time, is, somebody told me the term member staffer, that they've been around so long and accumulated so much power and has been given so much power by the speaker that he's almost this unelected voice shaping the direction of Democratic policy, particularly on health care, which, as we all know, is a huge issue for many progressives.
Okay, so I mean, I got so many questions to ask you about this, but I want to just set the table, get a sense of who he is, and then sort of what the broader implications are of this. But before we go specifically to his history, do we understand do you have a sense of what the relationship is between Pelosi and Primus? Like, is he reflective of what she wants to do, or is he driving the agenda? Like, how does that work?
Well, we can go by her public statements. So in a town hall meeting in 2013, she said, and I'm quoting, "On health policy, what does Wendell think is what we say all the time about this issue." So there's no question that Wendell Primus is empowered by the Speaker to speak on her behalf, to make policy on her behalf on these particular issues around healthcare and also around deficits. Actually, he's very involved in that issue as well. So we shouldn't see any distance between Wendell Primus and Nancy Pelosi. I think that actually it's kind of a failing on the part of House progressives that they kind of divorce the two, right? They say, we have a problem with what Wendell Primus is saying, but not Pelosi. They are aligned. I mean, they are completely in step. I'm taking them at their word that when Wendell Primus talks, it might as well be Nancy Pelosi talking on these particular issues.
Do you think, and again, we'll get to who Wendell Primus is, because he's also, his history is also sort of fascinating and instructive, I think, of what is sort of like a generational divide here. But do you think that there is a reason why we are talking about Wendell Primus, why other members like Mark Pocan, who's quoted in your piece, are talking about Wendell Primus as opposed to Nancy Pelosi? In other words, is it conceivable that there's a sort of a good cop, bad cop quality that's going on here? Is there a conscious decision to sort of make this like, oh, this is like a sort of at arm's length from me, or is it opponents of Pelosi are using this opportunity to not knock her directly, but rather to say I'm knocking Primus so that she just gets the message, or what?
Right. I mean, I think it's easier for members to, in this case, go after a staffer rather than the Speaker of the House, who, any member needs the support or at least a working relationship with the Speaker of the House if they want to get their legislation onto the floor and passed. So it's difficult to overtly criticize the Speaker, right? But it's easier to criticize the Speaker's staffer for speaking out of turn or whatever you want to say. I think it's a bit of a cop-out, but, in context, you understand it to a degree that this is a way to express disappointment or dissatisfaction with the direction of the leadership's policies on, particularly around healthcare, without overtly attacking the Speaker. But my view is that there's just not a lot of distance there between Primus and Pelosi.
All right, so let's circle back around to Pelosi, but let's just take this little detour through Wendell Primus's history, because it really is fascinating. This is a guy who, in 1996, in response to Bill Clinton's welfare reform bill, resigns in protest. Like,
that's correct.
Like, just even saying those words, resigns in protest, never mind for something that I agree with, is something that's virtually unheard of, it seems like, in politics. Like this,
it's a very principled position that you do not see every day. As you said, at the time, Primus was working in the Department of Health and Human Services. So he was on the Clinton administration staff. And when President Clinton said he would sign the welfare reform bill, Primus very overtly and in a public letter said, I cannot remain here. I did this analysis. I think children would be hurt by your welfare reform bill, and I cannot stay. And I cannot disown that analysis regarding the impact of the bill, and I'm going to publicly resign. Now, 5 years later...
Now, wait a second. Let me just say, just to put a fine point on this, this is like the type of guy, like I would have a poster of this guy in my, in my apartment back in the day.
Right.
I mean, it's like,
Now, I want to say two things about it, though. First of all, 5 years later, Primus pops up in the New York Times after there were studies showing that the impact of welfare reform was not as acute, at least at that time, which was during an economic boom.
Right.
I mean, from 96 to 2001 is not sort of a stress test of welfare reform.
Yeah, well, he's, I guess, 6 or 7 years away from like finding out that, oh, wait a second, maybe I should have.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Right.
But in 2001, he tells New York Times, welfare reform is working better than I thought it would, and whatever we've been doing over the last 5 years, we ought to keep going. So a little bit too credulous there. It doesn't discount his principled resignation, but it adds some context. The second thing is that, what was he actually doing here? The fight over welfare reform, to someone like Primus, who is indicative of a lot of liberals in his generation who were beaten down by the Reagan Revolution and whose goal in public policy is to just sort of hang on to whatever scraps of the welfare state were still left after the ravages of Reaganism. I mean, that is his M.O., and it was his M.O. in 1996 when he did this resignation, and it's his M.O. today. He is someone who thinks that what you do as a lefty is defend what we have now from right-wing assault and never expand anything, because America can't do that. He believes there are limits and constraints to progressive policy, and that the best we can do is make sure food stamps are paid for, and make sure LIHEAP is paid for, and things like that, rather than transform the system.
And so to be clear, this is a different story than God, I can't remember the guy who went around and twisted arms for Medicare D and the Republicans, who was the head of that.
DeLay?
Not DeLay, but the guy who was head of the committee and literally was negotiating with an insurance company at that time. His name escapes me. I can't remember.
Oh, Billy Tauzin.
Yes, it was Billy Tauzin. Right, exactly. And
he was with the pharmaceutical industry, but yes.
Well, he was literally...
He ended up becoming the head of pharma.
And he was negotiating for that job while he was developing Medicare Part D, which was the drug...
Now, he was a member, not a staffer.
Right.
To be clear.
But I'm sure there are examples of staffers who do that type of thing too, where it's just completely, I'm going to leverage this as a job in the private sector. This isn't that type of story, is it?
Yeah, Primus is not a neoliberal, right? He's not a Clintonite. He is not someone who is really out to reduce the welfare state in meaningful ways, right? He is sort of a center on budget and policy priorities, where he worked for a time in between the Clinton administration and Pelosi, or the Brookings Institution. There's a type of liberal that's just sort of a beaten down liberal. I say the last of the loser liberals in the piece, who just wants to hang on to these little scraps of the welfare state and can't conceive of government doing anything more ambitious than that. And this is useful sometimes when, Primus clashed with Rahm Emanuel during the Affordable Care Act debates. And we remember that Pelosi was the one who said, after Scott Brown defeated Martha Coakley in the seat for Ted Kennedy's Senate seat, and Democrats suddenly lost a 60-vote majority in the Senate, Pelosi was the one saying we have to keep going, and Primus was aligned with that, right?
Whereas Rahm Emanuel was saying we should cut back. We should cut back and just go for something, call it the ACA, but let's just do.
He wanted to stop anything,
right?
So they're useful. I mean, what Dean Baker, who's a progressive economist, I'm sure you've had on the show, has what he said to me for this piece is that they do great work between the 40-yard lines, right?
Right.
When something might be cut, they're there to tell you why it's important, and it's good and useful. But it's never going to get you into the end zone. It's never going to change the game. They just don't. They have a very narrow mindset on policy debates, and Primus exemplifies that. And I think that's clear in how he's talked about Medicare for all. I think it's clear in something that I go into detail with in the piece, which is this question of drug price legislation that Primus is spearheading, going against a more aggressive solution put forward by House Democrats, and trying to come up with something that the Trump administration can sign, which seems a little cramped. It's just their mindset. They're beaten down by the Reagan Revolution. There's a historical context to it. They grew up seeing all of these things go away, and they built this sort of defensive crouch. Let's just protect what we have. Let's not make trouble, and let's move forward.
And so we have this. This is a problem because
it's a problem now because we have a new crop, a new generation of Democrats who have much broader policy ambitions, animated by the fact that the last 40 years of this defensive crouch has not worked. Right? I mean, we have soaring income inequality. We have 30 million people uninsured. We have many more underinsured. We have stagnant wages that we've had for the last 40 years. People think the status quo and just protecting what we have is not good enough, particularly the new group of Democrats on the left. And now, instead of aligning with a Wendell Primus to fight Clintonites, they are in open competition with Wendell Primus over the future of liberal policymaking.
Now, I really want to limit this to this conversation to Pelosi in the House. But although there's obviously like a parallel fight happening, in the context of the presidential election with Bernie and Cap. And I don't want to get into that because I need to save that for tomorrow. but like what is going on? What is going on here with that fight? Because Pelosi is out there making a real show, right? This is not like, oh, she said something offhand and people are blowing it up. There's been a consistent drumbeat from her to attack this new generation that is, led by half a dozen Democratic women, frankly, who are freshmen, at least in the public perspective. But what is going on with that? Like, what is the theory here? Like, why are they being attacked when it was a completely different faction that was literally trying to take her out? In fact, it seems to me that incoming freshmen, the more progressive ones, were the ones who ultimately sort of like shored up her support. What is going on? Is this for show? Is this for the protection of some of these blue dogs who won in 2018, where you had like a lot of purple districts turn, a Democrat won in purple districts? Like, what's going on?
Right. I mean, I don't think it's for show. I think part of it is protection of the New Democrat, Blue Dog, Purple State freshman members who represent the margin of the House majority. But I also think it plays back into this situation with Wendell Primus, who views House progressives as people who leadership needs to be protected from, right? This idea that these that progressive ideas must be shunned because the best you can do in public policy making is just protect and defend the status quo, and that we hear about this sort of concept that Republicans cater to their base and Democrats ignore their base, or one fears their base and one doesn't, right? And that's, I think, what this is about, right? It's Pelosi, who's comes from the old guard. Primus comes from the old guard of thinking that fears moving, an inch down the football field on these various policies, and it's almost a fear of governing in some ways, or at least meeting the political moment. Their particular beliefs about policy have not been updated to match the political moment. I mean, Pelosi is still, petrified of the deficit. She did a speech last year on the floor of the House praising Pete Peterson, who was this billionaire that devoted the end of his life to trying to cut Social Security.
Yes,
and she gave a celebratory address on the floor of the House for him. Primus is at the center of those debates, by the way. He constantly talks about the deficit. He was deeply involved in ensuring that there was a pay-go provision in the House rules that says you can't put a new program up unless you offset it somewhere else in the budget. This is a mindset. This is a worldview, and progressives of the modern era of these new freshmen represent a threat to that worldview. And whether it's sincere a sincere disagreement over policy or a fear about the political ramifications, either way, the functionally it's the same, right? I mean, functionally, that's how it manifests itself in this tension that you're seeing right now within the House caucus.
Okay, so it leaves me with two questions, but probably more. One is, do they so they're stuck in a specific mindset, right? That is that the Democrats have been trapped in. I mean, back when people were really debating whether we could call ourselves liberal or progressive, right? And nobody was identifying as a democratic socialist, where Bernie would. The most media Bernie would get would be coming on Air America, frankly, and maybe occasionally Democracy Now! These people are stuck in this mindset. Does it inhibit their ability to also wage politics in this era? In other words, the same sort of fear that they're driven by that makes them sort of ineffectual in many respects and not up to the moment. And this is something that we complained about. You and I could have had this conversation in 2006, right? In 2005, we probably did, about how Democrats were not being strong enough in the face of Republicans, that they were afraid of their own shadow, that they had learned the wrong lessons, that they keep trying the same thing and it keeps failing. Now, of course, we have another, decade plus worth of evidence to this effect. But does their this mindset also inhibit their ability to win this internal battle?
I mean, I think it's at odds with a growing set of the caucus, and maybe the best way to answer that is with something concrete, and it's around this whole controversy on drug pricing. So last year, Lloyd Doggett, who's a progressive, who is now the chair of the Subcommittee on Health at the House Ways and Means Committee, he put together legislation allowing for direct negotiation of drug prices in Medicare with the pharmaceutical companies, which is banned right now per that 2002 legislation you were talking about earlier. And what he said is, my bill has direct negotiation, and if they can't come to an agreement, the government can make compulsory licenses of these drugs and give them to manufacturers so that they can make a generic version that will compete. And that's sort of the whip hand for the government to say, okay, if you don't want to negotiate with us, we'll just take your license and we'll put a generic version on the market. So Primus apparently agreed with that for a little while, and then when Democrats got the majority, he changed, and he went with a new concept that involves third-party arbitration. So the drug companies will put a price up for, and this is only for certain drugs. Drug companies will put a price up, Medicare will put a price up, and the arbitrator will choose one or the other. That's his new plan, and it undermined this work that Doggett had been doing for a year, getting 122 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives on his bill. So now there's this open warfare between a process that has gone through for a year with outside groups and people within the Progressive Caucus and among House Democrats, and Wendell Primus, who kind of big-footed in and said, no, what we want to do is this arbitration, and I'm going to work directly with the Trump administration to try to find a bill that they would support. So, I mean, right there you see sort of how this affects policy and how this in some ways inhibits policy, because now you have this huge fight within the caucus on something that both parties have said they want to do, which is lower drug prices. I have another follow-up piece to that coming out very shortly that I think I won't scoop myself on. But there are other implications of this that involve stakeholder industries and how Democrats are aligning. Primus, the Primus Pelosi faction, is aligning with stakeholders in this fight. So that's about all I can say on that.
Well, where does the surely the leadership of the Democrats in the House must realize that they won on health care, right? And that they're going to need an issue going into 2020. And are they just thinking that like it'll be enough to say we're going to marginally help Obamacare get better? I mean, is that going to be the pitch?
I mean, that is
we're going to
what
nibble around the edges. If you need somebody to nibble around the edges of Obamacare, we're your party.
This is what they're pushing. I mean, they're saying the legislation they rolled out earlier this year is for marginal improvements to the ACA. On this drug pricing thing, they want a solution that pharmaceutical companies and lobbyists appear to be more comfortable with, this arbitration idea, rather than compulsory licensing. On everything on health policy, which, as you correctly suggest, is what won Democrats back the House, they have sought the incremental option over the wider range.
It's the marginally better deal. That's what we're going to offer them, the marginally better deal.
Right, the marginally better deal. And maybe 10 years ago that actually, that's kind of what the ACA was, right? So it kind of made sense because it was the center of gravity in the House was closer to that idea. But it's a new generation, and there just aren't, there are a lot of House Democrats that just aren't on board with this go along to get along approach.
Okay. So give me, I want a really clear-eyed vision of how much of this is a new generation, how much of it is pre-existing members of Congress who are more to the left, but a certain sort of subset of new Democrats are just, they're dispositionally, maybe they're ideologically similar, maybe to a little bit to the left, but they're dispositionally much more aggressive and much more convinced, much more bold, I guess, really, for lack of a better term. And so how much of that, give me a sense of what the dynamic is there, right? Because, a guy like Pocan has been in there for a while, right? And guys like Jim McGovern have been in there for a while. But it's unclear to me, where a guy like Jim McGovern, who is saying don't worry about the pay-go as much because it's just, it's just to provide cover. We can always get a waiver. He's clearly, I think his politics are in the right place, but I wonder if his sort of disposition, for lack of a better term, is in the right place. And to the extent that there's that dynamic between these two different groups, is there anybody emerging as a potential, a legitimate potential leader? And, I know people listening to this audience are saying, well, AOC, but I'm talking about somebody who has enough experience and enough relationships in there to sort of lock in a vote, but also is, progressive.
Well, first of all, Mark Pocan has only been in the House since 2013. So not super long. And the same goes for Pramila Jayapal,
right?
And who I think is 2016 maybe is when she got elected. And those two this year became the co-chairs of the Progressive Caucus. And a lot of this reflects that changeover. So prior to this, Keith Ellison was head of the Progressive Caucus. Raul Grijalva had a leadership position there. Lynn Woolsey, even going further back, had a leadership position. And I don't think I'm speaking too out of turn here by saying that the old guard of the Progressive Caucus didn't have a terribly strategic mindset in terms of trying to advance their interests. They weren't as aggressive with leadership. They weren't as aggressive with their own members.
Right.
Even to this day, there are members of the Progressive Caucus who are also in the New Democrat coalition, which is kind of crazy. But Pocan and Jayapal have taken a somewhat harder line. You saw this last week when Democrats tried to pass a budget resolution that would have given more money to defense spending than domestic spending. And progressives, led by Pocan and Jayapal, said, no, we want parity between those two buckets of spending, and we're going to block this bill on the floor if you bring it up. And ultimately, they had to scuttle that vote, because if they would have put parity on the floor, then New Democrats probably would have blocked a bill on the floor. So the larger point is that there is a divide in the party. There are two almost equally robust factions, the New Democrats and the Progressive Caucus, who are at odds on. They have sincere disagreements on policy. And
can you quantify that? How many are we talking about in terms of actual numbers?
I think the Progressive Caucus is something between 90 and 95 members, and the New Democratic Caucus is something between 90 and 95 members.
Wow.
So, I mean, you're talking about almost the entire caucus in one of those two coalitions.
So,
So
when we hear the DCCC come out a couple of weeks ago and say,
right,
if you in any way as a vendor, right, if you're someone who's a campaign consultant, or you're somebody who, like, I make signs for congressional campaigns, or I do fundraising for congressional campaigns, or I do media buys for congressional campaigns. If you are one of those contractors and you work for someone who is a challenger in a primary, you will get cut off from being able to get any general election gigs from the DCCC, which is like basically, I don't know, I'm trying to think of what the equivalent is. It's like, if you go on any of if you go on any podcasts, we're not going to let you go on, go on radio or something like that, or I mean, to the extent that there's any value in any of it.
The question about that is, to what degree is that just incumbency protection, which is all the DCCC is anyway,
right?
And to what degree is that ideological? Like, are they going to blackball a vendor who works with a potential primary challenger to Rashida Tlaib?
Right.
Which is likely, because she is a Palestinian American who represents a largely African American community, and in fact, there was a sort of a split between votes for several different African Americans in that primary. This was the race to succeed John Conyers, and that's why Tlaib came on top. She got a plurality, but not a majority of votes, and if one African American Democrat went against her, they would at least have a fighting chance of winning that primary. So is the DCCC going to hold to that? Would they blackball someone who worked with a challenger to Rashida Tlaib or Ilhan Omar or AOC? Or is this just about progressive challenges to incumbent centrist Democrats? So that's the question that remains sort of to be answered. But, once again, there's this divide. And leadership is clearly on the side of the more centrist faction of that divide. And it's led by Wendell Primus, who has this sort of reputation as a liberal lion, but it comes out of a very narrow worldview of what it means to be a liberal. So that's the best way I can describe it.
When you talk to some on the more progressive side, do they how pointed is this? Where are we in the understanding of this dynamic amongst House members, and what are they talking about as what's the next step? I mean, is there, because you're telling me that this leadership is a little bit more strategic. So they must have assessed this problem, and their plan is to do X, Y, and Z over how long?
Well, I mean, it starts with the fact that I'm able to get quotes on the record about a staffer to Nancy Pelosi. I mean, that the unprecedented nature of that should be understood by everybody. I mean, Mark DeSaulnier, who's a member of the Progressive Caucus, representative out here in California, said on the record, there are some people on staffs who start to think that they have to protect democracy from elected officials. I mean, that's a pretty stark statement that he was making about the role of these member staffers who sort of get too big for their britches. So I think being open about this controversy is a first step, to say that there's a debate here, there's a divide here. There are people who are frustrating progress, and here's who they are. That's a first step. Now, obviously, Pelosi is, which people somewhat, I think, don't remember, Pelosi is term limited now. She cannot seek another term beyond, I believe, 2022 as Speaker of the House. So obviously there is going to be a lot of factional fighting over who will succeed Nancy Pelosi, but certainly that can be an area where this divide can be managed in some way. I know that there's this thought that Hakeem Jeffries is being groomed to be the next Speaker of the House because he took the position that Joe Crowley had before AOC defeated him. I believe that someone like a Jayapal or a Pocan has designs on perhaps becoming Speaker and using their support within the Progressive Caucus to do that. We're a couple elections away from having ultimately to see what that decision is going to be. But what happens in 2020 on the presidential side, who is the leader acknowledged of the party by the vote of the people, is going to play a role in that. These things will play out. But the fact that this is so out in the open is a departure from, I think, the strategy of previous years.
David Dayen, always I learn something from you, and I appreciate it. The piece is Wendell Primus, the most powerful staffer in Congress, represents a generational divide on the left. We will link to that at majority.fm, and we'll also link to the American Prospect. Folks, go there, sign up, subscribe to the American Prospect. It's a great deal that's about to become an even greater deal because of its new executive editor.
Let me just say that, let me just make my little pitch that we have very exciting plans for the future of the Prospect, more issues per year, more writers, more content on the website on a daily basis, being part of this real.
What did you do to your phone?
Ideological divide in the party. Me?
Yeah, you just walked away from your phone or something.
Did I? No, I'm here.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay.
Give the pitch again.
We have a lot of exciting plans at the Prospect. More content, more issues of the magazine, more of an impact on the web, more writers, and really this fascinating opportunity to be at the heart of this ideological debate on the left, and both a policy and political debate. And we are excited about the future of the magazine. We're in a good position to be part of that debate. And yes, we really covet and require the support of readers to make sure we can continue to bring you this work. So if you are someone who reads me, this is where I'm going to be, and we need your support. And June 1st is when it'll all kick off.
All right, we'll put a link to both those things. David Dayen, always a pleasure. Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Bye. So now we are set up to we've gotten one part of what's going on in the political scene on the from the center to the left. We'll get a little more of that tomorrow, and that is the one of the big stories. Now, of course, tomorrow the Mueller report supposedly is going to be released. It's going to be heavily redacted. I don't know if you're going to be able to read any of it. Not clear who it's being released to. I don't know if it's going to be released to the general public. It's going to be sent to Congress, and then, but isn't it? It's going to be generally released. Do we even know?
I have no idea.
Go to fullyexonerated.com.
The Patriot/fullyexonerated.com.
If we have a lot of people who run organizations who listen to this program, And if someone does not have notexonerated.com.
Oh, no, or better yet, fullyexonerated.com.
You should also just get on that.
NoCollusionWitchHunt.com.
Right, exactly.
TotalWitchHunt.org.
Witchhunt.gov.
Witchhunt.gov. That'd actually be... That would be actually great.
So they're just going to rename the DOJ.
Yeah, don't give Barr any ideas.
Folks, just a reminder, you can support this program by going to jointhemajorityreport.com, jointhemajorityreport.com. When you become a member of the program, you support daily content like the program we just had today. And as a way of saying thank you, we give you access to all the fun half, and you can carry it around as a podcast. So check it out. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. As always, if you cannot afford it, we do not allow finances to become a bar to entry. Send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com, and we will work something out with you. Also, justcoffee.coop. Check it out. 30% off this month. You don't even need to use the coupon code majority. And for members, you can always go and check out the podcast listing on iTunes to get a write-up of what deals we may have for you from our advertisers. So you can check it out there. Michael, last night was Tuesday, presumably. Though I have to say, it was sort of clean in here today. So it's almost like, did you guys do the show?
It was almost like a typical Tuesday where we clean everything up.
Almost.
We usually take out the garbage.
Okay.
Recycling.
Yeah, but we recorded ourselves doing it and made it patron content.
Yeah. The cleanup Patreon bonus content. The
That's actually smart.
crew cleans up the MR mess.
Yeah, some people are into that. People are sick.
That's awesome. All right. The Daen, Richard Wolff, joined us, and we talked about Gramsci hegemony. Got his thoughts on UBI. I did a history of the Third Way and the conspiracy against Bernie, but why the Third Way project is done. And of course, a whole bunch of other, global and economic content, the stuff you always get from TMBS, patreon.com/TMBS. This Sunday, an illicit history of Deutsche Bank that actually does indirectly connect the Nazi money trail to loans to Donald Trump with Corey Pine. It's pretty fascinating, disturbing stuff. Patreon.com/TMBS, Michael Brooks Show on YouTube. Thanks to our first 40,000 subs on YouTube. And of course, there are a few left to this Saturday, Bootleg Theatre in LA, our second live show with Ana Kasparian, Big Waz, and Nando Vila. See you Saturday.
I think you're trying to say Buttigieg.
The Buttigieg Theater in Koreatown. Yes.
Jamie.
This week on the Antifada, we took a little field trip to the biennial blast that is the Historical Materialism Conference, and we took the opportunity to interview some very exciting, very famous leftists, kind of on the fly, at parties, in the hallway, gonzo style. So we've got just a little sampling here. I won't say them all. We've got George Chicarillo Mar on the coup in Venezuela. We've got Jasper Burns on communization, Michelle O'Brien of the Trans Oral History Project on abolishing the bourgeois family. Virgil Texas clears some things up about what his political tendency is, and much, much more. I also feel like I should plug this show that I'm a part of because I'm pretty excited about it. Katie Halper and Struggle Session are doing a joint live show at Littlefield in Brooklyn, Friday, May 10th. And I'm going to be a guest along with Jake Flores and Matt Taibbi. So it should be pretty cool.
Nice. Where is Littlefield? What part of Brooklyn?
It's in Gowanus.
Oh, it's right by.
It's like it's pretty close to the Bell House.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Cool. That's awesome. I know that spot.
Matt,
Literary hangover. If you haven't checked out the Oscar Wilde episode, I mean, pretty much everybody has, but if you haven't, check it out.
Everybody's checking it out.
On Saturday, looking back on the war in Spain by George Orwell, an essay where you sort of see some of the early concepts that you might recognize in 1984, like 2 + 2 = 5. Orwell says the one problem with totalitarian lies is that you can't lie. Have lies interfere with military-industrial. You need to know what reality is, so that's a tension there. And also why Orwell says the workers, though they aren't international in sympathy often, are the best long-term resistance against fascism.
That sounds very interesting.
A lot of history. Coming back. All right, folks. Take a quick break. See you in the fun half. That's right. It's the fun half, ladies and gentlemen. The fun half. Wow, he looks bad there.
Yeah, there's a picture. I'll just try to find it where his upper body looks like a hot air balloon.
There's something that looks really strange about him there.
It's the bottom half of his face.
Yeah, it looks like he had like some type of operation. Like his whole second neck was taken out.
Ilhan's really stressing me out.
Is this the his Ilhan? I mean, to be honest, I'm surprised he's saying anything else but talking about Ilhan Omar. To be honest with you, right? Because she is like the trifecta for him. A woman, a Muslim, and a person of color.
Nailed it.
And she's like, would definitely kneel if there was if she was a football player. There's no doubt about it. Here he is on, it's also sort of strange that he's on local news. He's out in full campaign mode. Here he is.
He's trying to turn Minnesota red. Come on, Minnesota.
Channel 5 in Minnesota. KSTP TV interview. Here it is.
Woman Omar sent out a release last night saying that your tweet from a couple of days ago has led to direct threats on her life. Any second thoughts about that tweet and the way it was produced and put together?
No, not at all. Look, she's been very disrespectful to this country. She's been very disrespectful, frankly, to Israel. She is somebody that doesn't really understand, I think, life, real life, what it's all about. It's unfortunate. She's got a way about her that's very, very bad, I think, for our country. I think she's extremely unpatriotic and extremely disrespectful to our country.
One final question. Thursday, it sounds like the redacted Mueller report.
All right, pause it for 1 second. Understand, he is responding to her claim that she is getting death threats. She is a congresswoman of the United States. In the wake of his tweet, she is getting death threats. And his response is to blow all the way past that.
Something weird about her.
This is incitement.
Sort of.
What other
he's
word
doubling
could you
down.
use besides incitement?
Sort of justified, I'd have to say. Like justified.
This is I'm certainly the word I'm going to use. I don't understand any other word you could use other than incitement. That is so disgusting on multiple levels. Down, by the way, to somebody who has worked their way from being a refugee to a congressperson.
She doesn't understand life.
By a trust fund baby, real estate scam artist that she doesn't understand life.
I mean, I think I think that there's got to be a more aggressive stance by folks like Pelosi and Schumer for this type of stuff. I mean, it's just I just don't understand.
Let's be real. They helped
open
the door for it by going to AIPAC. It's not just that they haven't properly guarded her. Steny Hoyer was on the continuum, frankly, of what Trump said. Pelosi's
Schumer
playing the middle, and so was Schumer. Absolutely, it's disgusting.
Yep. They really have to get out in front of this, and it's too late because they were. Well, I should say they did get out in front of it, and they opened the door to a lot of this, and made it very, very easy. And that's the other part of the conversation we were having with Dayen today. Is this? There are sort of like some more generic, banal, old school democratic issues that are inhibiting their success. But then there's this whole other sort of subset of like of where support for Israel comes in, and the just Islamophobia and exploiting that. It's very problematic. However,
remember the pipe bomb guy from just a couple of months ago as well, right?
However, if you want to bring in a voice of reason in this question about Ilhan Omar, who better than the former felon who used one of the apartments set aside for rescue workers down at the 9/11 site to maintain an affair with who did he have the affair with? I can't remember who he did. And Bernie Kerik, a man of a complete lack of ethics and morals and credibility. Do you have
Judith Regan?
Was he the one who had it with Judith Regan? I always get confused between who Giuliani had his affairs with and who Kerik had his affairs with.
This is the opening line of a 2004 New York Times story. During his use of the apartment, Mr. Kerik and Judith Regan engaged in an extramarital affair there, according to someone who
spoke.
Get an ass.
That is called commitment to your job. commitment to your job. I don't want to leave the 9/11 site, and so I'm going to have my affairs here.
We gotta see if everything's safe for the workers.
So
bang my publisher.
If you don't have an affair in your 9/11 apartment, you're basically letting the terrorists win.
Now, to be fair to Carrick, he showed his commitment to things like 9/11 after he got out of jail by becoming I think he was working with Giuliani, maybe still does, by becoming a consultant to some of the worst autocratic regimes and oppressive regimes around the world, ostensibly to protect their national security. So who better than to have on Sean Hannity's program the other night to talk about Ilhan Omar?
But I lost 23 people that work for me. We lost 400 first responders and close to 1,700 people that were in the building.
Unbelievable. And so you
Pause
hear
it. And the way I showed them my proper respect was to engage in my affair down at the site, because I wanted, like I say, I wanted to be there. I wanted them to see all of it. Go ahead.
And so you hear her anti-Semitic comments. Then the comment, really struck by what she said about, the way they say Al-Qaeda, haha.
No, well, here's the issue, Sean. She's infatuated with Al-Qaeda, with Hamas, Hezbollah. She was at CARE at a fundraiser. She was the keynote speaker at a fundraiser for CARE, which, according to the United Arab Emirates, an Arab nation, they are a terrorist organization.
They're also the non-indicted co-conspirator in the Homeland
and a number of them.
In the what Homeland case? The Homeland case? So Bernie Carrick just sort of picking up the mantle, maybe not quite as incendiary as the president. Of course, when the president says this stuff, it's just a matter of time, right, before he repeats these lies. This has been going on for a decade, and it's gotten worse. And if the Democrats don't stand up to it, nobody's going to. So she's out there, and, frankly, she should be getting a medal for what she's going through.
I just want to say really briefly, there's a 2014 report in the Washington Post. Why has the UAE deemed CARE a terrorist group? Which obviously it's not deemed a terrorist group in the United States. And I'll quote briefly. It says, the UAE's list seems to be driven by something closer to home, however. The very first name included is the UAE Muslim Brotherhood. They're fierce opponents of the Muslim Brotherhood, and a significant number of the more surprising inclusions on the list have ties to transnational Islamist group, the Muslim American Society. So, basically the point, to simplify it, is this has everything to do with a rivalry with Qatar and internal politics, which have definitely faced criticism from like the typical groups you'd expect, like Amnesty International. So that's quite exciting. The UAE is also a partner in the Saudi mass murder of Yemen right now.
Okay, but where was she while I was having an affair at 9/11?
I was going to say, I could assure you, during those attacks, I was not banging the publisher of If I Did It by O.J. Simpson.
No, see, now you're confused, because that is why Rudy wanted the command center in Manhattan as opposed to Brooklyn, where they had suggested it, so that he could have his affair. And then I just took the one across the street on the other side. See, we basically had the whole Ground Zero area surrounded and protected from both the north and the west, so that if anything happened, we were there having an affair.
When am I allowed to use the word infidel?
There you go.
Also, I just want to note, a lot of people are standing with Ilhan Omar by sending her money. She was one of the top House Democrats in fundraising this quarter. She raised over $630,000 from online donors.
Good for them.
That's one thing you can do.
That is a great thing to do.
I have to say, including myself, and it was an incredibly satisfying thing to do. Please do that. She really needs it.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 203 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 203.
This is Colleen from Connecticut.
Hello, Colleen. What's on your mind?
Well, at about 10:45, I went over and talked to the strikers at the Stop and Shop nearby where I work.
All right,
And,
just to remind people, hold on,
they're-
Colleen, hold on 1 second. I just want to remind people, workers at Stop and Shop throughout New England, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, I think, are where their main Stop and Shops are striking. All right, go ahead.
Okay, and the news isn't good. According to them at that hour, and hopefully things have changed by now, but I doubt they have, the talks are off, and Stop and Shop is basically hoping to have the strikers break the strikers mentally and have them give up.
Oy.
Yeah.
And what were the spirits of the strikers?
Well, they were happy I brought them a snack. I honestly did not bring them enough. But they were happy someone was supporting them. I can't really say it was very positive.
Right.
But
Well, I appreciate you going down there. More people should do that, and that's the kind of support these folks need. Here is, let's play, we're going to play a little bit of footage from when Elizabeth Warren stopped by there. I guess presumably this is in Massachusetts earlier in the week. Appreciate the call.
More than 30,000 Stop and Shop employees are striking across Massachusetts, and here in Somerville today they were joined by Senator Elizabeth Warren, who came out to rally them in their efforts as they try to turn customers away to other grocery store chains. They say their contract negotiations with management are stalled.
My message to Stop and Shop is just pay these folks a fair wage, their health care benefits, and give them a shot at a retirement. That's all these workers are looking for. And I think we should all stand in solidarity with the workers.
Senator Warren shook hands with picketers who went on strike yesterday afternoon.
Stay out of the stores until this deal is over, until this fight is over.
The strike impacts more than 200 stores across Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. This location remains open, but customers had mixed expectations about whether they'd continue to shop at the chain if picketers keep posting up outside parking lot entrances.
There you go.
Don't cross the picket line, folks.
Get your groceries somewhere else for the time being.
Period.
This is a little bit strange. We have been on this beat now for a couple months. And, of course, I'm talking about the Jexodus beat. Now, a lot of you who have been following the Jexodus beat are probably like, oh, Sam, I'm sorry, you've misspoken. It's not the Jexodus beat. It's the Exodus beat. It started out as the Jexodus beat, and then, Haaretz, do we have that clip? Well, no, there was an article. Haaretz, the Israeli paper, reported that Jexodus was no longer, that it was Exodus because, of course. This is back in, what was the date on this? It was March 22nd. Jexodus, we hardly knew ye. Right-wing Jewish movement changes name to Exodus, and there's a picture of the spokesperson, Elizabeth Pipko. She also set it up, as far as we know, and they realized after they came out with Jexodus that was sort of silly. That was like calling something Jewish, calling Passover Jassover, like the Jewish Passover, but Exodus,
like
of course,
Passover for Jews.
So Exodus comes from the word Exodus, which is one of
a Bob Marley album.
Which is a Bob Marley album, and that was inspired, of course, by the one of the 5 books of the Torah, which was Exodus, about the leaving of Jews from Egypt and into the desert, into the land of ultimately Canaan. Let's not get too caught up in this. I don't want to start a fight here, but and here is that spokesperson again showing up on Fox and Friends today, and now it's Jexodus. Oh, and also the spokesperson is gone.
Trump campaign advisor board member Jeff Balaban is the founder of Jexodus, a movement urging Jewish people not to vote Democrat. Joins us right now from our nation's capital with an inside look. Jeff, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So why the meeting at the White House?
Well, first of all, I just want to make a slight correction. Jexodus is not about urging Jews not to vote Democrat. It's actually urging the major political parties, and these days the Democrats seem to have the bigger problem, to distance themselves from rising anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism is being mainstreamed.
Now, wait a second. Wait a second. Can we go back to when Jexodus was Exodus and then Jexodus again, and we had the first person who was a Jewish millennial who launched Jexodus? And let's go back to Jexodus.org, and here it is about leaving the Democratic Party. And she was a millennial who launched it, and this old guy is, wait, what's going on here? Go ahead.
Here with more on the movement is former Trump campaign staffer and Jexodus spokesperson, Elizabeth Pipko. Elizabeth, good morning.
Good morning.
Let's start at the
It
beginning.
says Jewish millennials launched Jexodus.
Means what?
Obviously, it's a play on Exodus, but we left Egypt, and now we're leaving the Democratic Party.
Now, wait a second. Now, what is going on here? I'm terribly confused. Go back to
Too many cooks in this kitchen.
Yeah, go back to the old millennial guy who looks to be about my age, if not older, who is now the millennial who launched Jexodus. This is now, we have now bookended the Jexodus with the Exodus in the middle. What's going on with the Trump people?
Urging Jewish people not to vote Democrat. Joins us right now from our nation's capital with an inside look. Jeff, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So why the meeting at the White House?
Well, first of all, I just want to make a slight correction. Jexodus is not about urging Jews not to vote Democrat. It's actually urging the major political parties, and these days the Democrats seem to have the bigger problem, to distance themselves from rising anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism is being mainstreamed.
Like they just
unfortunately,
it's like they pretend they didn't have the same interview 3.5 weeks ago with the millennial, because it was a millennial organization. And they've also pretended that they didn't change from Jexodus to Exodus to Jexodus again. My guess is they had problem with their search SEO on Exodus, that nobody could find them because they go Exodus and they find like, oh, this is Paul Newman. This is the Paul Newman movie.
It's like they're doing all their A/B testing just right in front of us.
Yes, exactly. Like
it's about leaving the Democrats. It's about all the Republican parties, all the parties. It's
just don't be anti-Semitic at
Right.
all. But
Right.
it happens to be that it's you.
But why
that
would it
was
be
better than 10 days ago.
But why would it be Jexodus if it's just about don't be anti-Semitic?
Because we're Jexiting
how
away
does-
from
Because
anti-Semitism.
the Democrats are way more anti-Semitic than the Republicans. Remember the Stronger Together bomber?
Yeah,
oh,
but-
wait, that was the MAGA bomber. I'm sorry.
All right, let's continue here.
being mainstreamed, unfortunately, in our political process, and mostly by people like Ilhan Omar, et cetera. The Democrats
Like
can't seem
Muslims,
to push
et
it
cetera.
back. Yesterday's event wasn't really about that, but it was certainly the backdrop to the feelings of what's happening in this festival of Passover that's coming up on Friday night, which is the Festival of Freedom. And we say in the Haggadah, in the book that we've read for thousands of years, we say that in every generation, they rise, meaning our enemies, the enemies of the Jews rise up against us to try and destroy us, and God saves us. And that was on everyone's mind. I mean, it's the best of times and the worst of times right now if you're Jewish in America and around the world.
You know what else the Haggadah says? It says, love and welcome the stranger. There's a big cup that we put on the table to symbolize the idea of welcoming the stranger. Welcoming the prophet Elijah, and the whole story, the whole story is about Jews being immigrants in another country and being treated poorly. Why this is bad. I'm making it simple for the simple sons out there.
I remember
the simple sons who can't get the name of their organization straight, who can't get their story straight about who started it, whether it was this old guy who works for Trump or millennials who launch it, whether it's Jexodus or Exodus or Jexodus, whether it's about leaving the Democratic Party or just leaving the idea of anti-Semitism, I guess. And why would anti-Semites respond to the idea of Exodus, or even a more Jewish Exodus than Exodus, Jexodus? None of this makes sense. And yet, what is the best part about it is that No one on Fox seems to even bat an eye. It's just like, whatever you got, we'll take it. Keep coming. We're going to make total asses of ourselves because we're theoretically a journalistic outfit, and we're just pretending like none of this is strange. Like, I can understand, like, if there was 6 months apart, but it literally, she was on a month earlier. Unbelievable.
They did do a pretty good job rolling with it, though.
Yeah, well, I think they're probably completely on autopilot. I mean, I can only imagine. I mean, my conjecture is, and this is total speculation, that one has to take all sorts of types of sedatives to be a Fox and Friends host or something like that. I don't know exactly. Maybe you need to, like, I don't know, lick electrical outlets or something like that just to sort of be able to deal with it. Let's go to the phones. Calling from an 845 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. It's Lauren. How are you?
Teacher Lauren, what's going on?
Not much. I had two things I wanted to discuss today, if you have the time.
Yes.
So you met my husband. He was raised Orthodox, and some of his siblings are still religious. So I've encountered vaccine skepticism. I don't think he's fully blown anti-vaxxing with one of my brothers-in-law. And these guys are all educated, in quotes, in yeshivas. So secular studies really aren't emphasized. There's a general skepticism of science as a secular field. It's not religious. So I feel like
I've read actually
in the religious
there was recently, I think it was a story in the Times about graduates of yeshivas complaining with that they are not being prepared for any type of the secular world, particularly in those areas of science.
Yeah, there's actually an ongoing lawsuit about the curriculum, the secular curriculum in yeshivas, and I'll see if I can find a link to send you. But I feel like this lack of emphasis and even scorn for the secular world makes people in these communities, which are really, really insular, a lot more susceptible to vaccine skepticism and just general nonsense about, there are toxins in the vaccines. So that might be why you see, measles just rampaging through, especially the Satmar communities in Brooklyn and in Rockland County.
Wow, interesting. Thank you. I didn't realize that your husband had been raised in an Orthodox household.
I get it. Now.
Carpenter.
I get it.
You met his family.
Carpenter.
So there's one other thing that I have to plug because I'd be a bad
Lauren,
PSA
your
member
husband
if
might
I
be a
didn't.
bigger deal than you realize.
He's pretty cool. I don't know.
Well, that sounds pretty significant. He's cool. I don't know. Big things.
I don't know. I mean, he is a mensch.
So what was the second thing, Lauren?
All right. So the Mid-Hudson Valley has its own chapter, the DSA. It's a new chapter. We just formed in February. And this past weekend, we had our very first brake light clinic. And I'd say it was pretty successful.
Oh, wow. That's
and
great.
our next one is scheduled for May 11th in the city of Kingston. And we have, and I hate this website, but I have to promote it. We have a Facebook page. We have an event page for the Brake Light Clinic. They're on Twitter. So if you live in Orange, Ulster, or Dutchess County in New York, come check us out. Volunteer if you can. If you can't, we're always fundraising. But, come see what we're doing.
All right. Teacher Lauren, thanks so
Very
much.
cool,
I appreciate
very
the
cool.
call.
Yeah, good to talk to you.
Bye.
Wow. That really just speaks to one of the divides, I think, within the Jewish community, because my mom probably would have signed me up for extra vaccines if she could have.
Calling from a 215 area code. Who's
There's
this?
no
Where you
more
calling
we
from?
can do. Oh, no, we'll die.
Sam, hi, it's Mindy. How are you?
Mindy!
Few things.
Yeah.
I wrote them down for maximum efficiency.
Thank you. I appreciate
Okay, first of all, yes, how are you?
I'm well.
On the Bernie train.
You're on the Bernie train.
Oh, hell yeah.
I got on the Bernie train. I'm on the Bernie train.
Wow.
I'm there.
What happened?
Well, I love Elizabeth Warren, and she's not going to make it. So I don't know his policy. I mean, all the other ones are corporate, bought, pharmacy, school. I mean, they're all bad. Nothing's going to change unless we go with a Bernie.
How do you?
So I'm on the Bernie train.
Now, how do you know that Elizabeth Warren? I'm not being. How do you know that Elizabeth Warren is not going to make it right now during this? In this, what's that? No. I mean, because I've just been engaged in conversations with this, like where people say the thing about Democratic voters is they're all like pundits and they all immediately decide that somebody can't win. Now, there's a lot of pressure because Donald Trump, people want Donald Trump defeated. But I'm just curious, this time in 2007, Obama is down by 10, 12, 15 points to Clinton at least. Giuliani is leading the pack in the Republican primary, 2008. What makes you think that she can't make it?
I have that feeling. She's just not going to get there. Just nothing other than a feeling. I just think she's not going to get there. And the only other one I want to know about is Pete. I like Pete, but I don't know what's going on with that. We have to learn more about him. But excuse me?
Gentrifier. Horrible housing record.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I like the gay aspect where he is with the Mike Pence thing. I think that's adorable, but just not feeling it with anybody but Bernie. I think Bernie's the way to go, personally. So I tweeted about it, and I'm like, people are freaking out on me, like they're going nuts, and people are scared of him.
You are
because
a lightning
he probably
rod.
can win.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
What are you talking about?
I think people are. I think he scares a lot of people. I think in the Democratic Party, some people think that he can't win. Some people are scared of him because of his politics. I think there's I mean, I think that there is sort of an irrational sort of like personalization of him that is, I think it's irrational, frankly, the critics, and frankly, it's irrational in terms of supporters, and that get a little bit too sort of like into his personality and like.
Oh God, they're crazy. No, they're not. They're crazy.
It just seems to me like, are people really concerned that he is, too set in his ways or something like that? Like, are we really in that area where you're worried that a candidate, because it seems to me, as a candidate, right, just assessing the candidacy of Bernie Sanders, that I think is effective for him is that he is so like, I don't want to say one note. I don't want to say one note, but he is so consistently on message because he has only one message, and he's very explicit about it. Now, some people find this off-putting, and he doesn't have the flexibility to introduce new facts and whatnot. But are people really seriously seeing that as a liability in this environment? Like, we have a president who is unable to absorb any facts and still has very deeply held opinions that are abhorrent. And he has proven, like, to me, one of the things that I'm concerned about when I see Warren, and maybe she has changed in this respect, and I think to a certain extent she has, but I'm afraid that, like her opening salvo in this race was the most problematic, is that the candidates, it's one thing to criticize Donald Trump. It's another to respond to him. You cannot let him dictate what you do. And Elizabeth Warren is great with policy. She is great as an executive. I think she would make a great...
She's a workhorse.
I think she would make a great president. But she launched her campaign essentially, basically responding to a demand of Donald Trump's. And no one does well in that situation. Nobody who is responding to Donald Trump is going to be successful in this campaign. They must move ahead with their own agenda, some of the agendas out there I find to be sort of little pablum-ish, but that can be effective, sadly, in our society. But they have to move ahead with their agenda. And that, I think, is why, Sanders in that respect as a candidate, I think is effective just on a sort of very superficial level. But Mindy, good luck to you.
Wait, no, I have to tell you something else.
Okay.
Oh, hello?
Hello?
Oh, were you hanging up on me?
Well, no. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. What were you going to say? I'm sorry, because I have a really funny story for you.
Okay, tell me the story.
Okay, so, before I tell you the story, I just want to tell you that Howard Schultz, that Bill Burton, he got that line from Jeffrey Wright's Dell commercial.
What?
The possibility bullshit. Okay, you know the thing that Howard Schultz says, like the infinite of possibilities? It's from Jeffrey Wright, the guy from Westworld, World does the Dell commercials. It's from a Dell commercial.
No.
Yes. Now, I was trying to find the Dell commercial when I was on hold, and I couldn't find the exact one.
All right.
There's like 25 Dell commercials that he does.
We're going to put the team on it. We're going to put the team on it.
Oh, man. Is it supposed to be ironic when he says it at the Dell commercial?
No.
Because it's ridiculous.
No, it sounded good when Jeffrey Wright said it for
Well,
Dell.
of course.
So,
he's the guy from, he's
now
a robot.
listen to
I
from
thought you were
Westworld.
going to say, dude, you're getting a Dell. But that's not
all
really
right.
relevant.
You have to listen to me. There's like 25 Dell commercials from
All right,
Jeffrey
we'll find
Wright.
it.
You have
We'll
to
find
keep
it. We'll
going
find
through
it.
them because
Okay.
That's number 2. Number 3, I got rid of my Republican girlfriend.
Oh, good. Well, it's about time.
Okay, so wait, this is funny. This is a funny story. I got rid of my Republican girlfriend. I hadn't called her in like 3 weeks, and she texted me like this whole fucking bullshit, like, why haven't I seen you when I've been doing this? And I got a new bathroom in my shore house, and we don't know where to go when we go to the Riviera, and we're not sure if we should go to Monaco and which wine place to go to, and like this whole like 4 like paragraph text, and I didn't respond to her, and she says, well, I guess you're not responding to me because you're so busy on Twitter. So she makes pretend she never saw my Twitter account. Like, that was the thing with us.
Mm-hmm.
She makes pretend she never sees it. So April 6th, I put out a tweet. I said to her, oh, shit, where the fuck's my tweet? I said, I finally got rid of my, I don't know what the tweet was.
I apologize to
but
parents
it was
out
something
there.
like, I finally got rid of my Republican girlfriend. She bragged for the last time she was, like, dishing on Omar and talking about Benjamin Netanyahu, how much he loves him and all that shit. She was, like, going through the whole thing. So I said, I finally got rid of it. I threw down the gauntlet. I cut the cord, and that was the end of it. So I didn't talk to her for, like, 3 weeks. That was another 3 weeks went by. And yesterday or the other day, she tweeted me. She didn't tweet me. She texted me, and she said, wait, let me find it. I had it all here. Now it's gone. She said, I saw your tweet.
Oh.
Since you finally got rid I saw your tweet since you finally got rid of me. Can you please leave the Tory Burch tote I lent you outside the door, and I'll come and pick it up when I'm in your area.
Wow.
She's coming for her tote. Wow.
She's
Sounds
coming
like
for her tote.
you Jexodist her
You
right
love
out
that?
of your life.
Jamie, do you love that? You have to love
I
that.
love it. Mindy, I am
She
ecstatic
told me
right
she
now.
never looked at Twitter in her life. She's been reading my freaking tweets the whole entire time.
Wow. And she let you have that tote that entire time too, but you just you crossed the bridge too far. Mindy, I hope listen, when we get our Majority Report merchandise store set up, which is going to happen soon, and when we have totes, guess what you're getting to replace that tote that she wants back?
Tote.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Mindy. We'll talk to you soon.
But that was good, right?
Yeah,
Bye.
I
Have
love
a great
it.
day.
Bye.
Let's sell it. Let's sell her ex-friend's tote for money and
we
give
will-
the money to Bernie Sanders.
Let's do that Dell thing tomorrow. We'll put it so we can actually do it because that's actually really great. We've talked about Jexodus, right? We went about as far as we could with that, I think.
For now.
So, I think having a whatever audio's playing, stop it. So having a one note, if you will, story, maintaining a consistent narrative is hugely important, I think, to getting your message out. And sometimes that message could be, like in Bernie's case, it has evolved over the past 40 years from, 2% of the country owns, 80% of the wealth to 1% of the country owns 80% of the wealth. That is the nature of what's been going on. 40 years ago, we didn't have a billionaire class in this country. Now we do. But you also could be like Pete Buttigieg, whose narrative is a little bit less specific.
Grassroots mobilization moment, and there is a generational change message that's resonating. But now also comes the time where people press you on specifics. Yeah. And you've spoken about how values should inform philosophy, and that goes down to policy. But when you say, for example, there'll be a radical change under a Buttigieg presidency, what does that mean? Because a lot of people, I think, have cottoned to your message because it feels reassuringly moderate in some respects.
Interesting. Well, first of all, tone really matters, right? So even as we're contemplating serious and sometimes profound structural reforms, we can do it in a way that doesn't make everyone feel like our hair is on fire. Look, this moment should not be underestimated in terms of its seriousness. I think in many ways we're still underreacting. But we don't have to react to it in a way that alienates others, in a way that makes it feel like there's such screaming that you can't tell what's even going on around
That
us.
makes you a clear contrast to the president.
So I want to both commend John Avalon from CNN for asking for specifics and then also for getting his question as soon as it seems to have come out of his mouth. I mean,
he was so excited by that pablum, though. You got to give him credit.
He answered the question, what are the specifics? And it's specifically tone.
And then for
and
someone
then he
like
said-
John
and
Avalon,
then-
he's just like,
Oh my
It's like-
God!
you mean tone is your specific?
He gave him like 9 different things he could choose to respond to in that question, and he responded to the easiest one, which is like, why are people reassured by you weirdly?
Well, it's mask off time for these people.
Well, I mean, and this is the amazing thing is that he's talking about the concepts of structural reform. He's talking about the concept of there being a fierce urgency of now, if you will, just to borrow a phrase from the last
Wonder where that came from.
and changey candidate that we had. But I still have yet to hear like the specifics. But it's not just Pete Buttigieg that talks with a little bit of pablum in terms of his own candidacy. It seems to be contagious. Here is Chuck Todd holding a round table about the buzz around Mayor Pete with a guy named Joshua Johnson, who is, where does he write for? NPR. Hey, an NPR guy. And Casey Hunt. And, you know, it is amazing. Brendan, well, let's play this and then we'll discuss.
This feels like a setup. I don't know. I'm curious what you make of the rise of Buttigieg. Why do you think he's, even if it's just for a moment, why do you think he's having this moment?
Because
what do you make
no
of
one's
it?
ever seen anyone like him before.
Yeah.
Think about what made Donald Trump such an unavoidable character on television. We were like, I have never, ever, come in, honey, come look.
You mean like if there's a horse in a hospital?
But it's this, I saw that John Mulaney special too. But it's also the same thing that made Barack Obama so compelling. We'd never seen anyone like him before. And there are a lot of interesting candidates on the Democratic side. I think Kamala Harris still has a story to tell. She is formidable. Obviously, Bernie Sanders is an interesting character, but Pete Buttigieg kind of represents this amalgam of personal traits that America's never seen before. So this early in the story,
But the individual traits they really like. like.
Right.
And they all in one package.
And he's an interesting character. Like, I'm not even looking at policy or politics or the fundraising piece is important, though, although I think Donald Trump kind of broke some of the rules in terms of how you spend money. But Pete's just like, he's the most interesting right now.
It was certainly interesting to hear Marcos write him off as just a small-town mayor from a liberal college town.
Yeah.
I think if I were running against Pete Buttigieg, I would probably refer to him that way.
Yes,
but
and I'm sure that you will hear people do that if they get around to attacking him.
But he seems to have already risen beyond
without
his
a doubt. I mean,
office.
One thing that Donald Trump showed us is that campaigns have changed. You know, we used to care a lot about what was on the front page of the Des Moines Register, and the way that the media landscape has shifted. It's a sad statement.
Ethanol subsidies. Have we even bothered covering it this year? I have no idea what anybody's position is on ethanol subsidies, and I don't think Iowans care.
I mean, look, I will always read the Des Moines Register whenever I'm in Iowa, for the record. However, it's become a national media campaign to a large degree. And if Donald Trump is reality TV, you know, maybe Pete Buttigieg is Game of Thrones and all this other, you know, highbrow television that, like, the other half of the country is watching.
The beauty of Game of Thrones is it goes high and goes low.
Well, there is that. But seriously, to Josh's point, I mean, he is clearly an incredibly talented guy. I mean,
breathtakingly stupid.
So, first off, that sound, that sensation you're feeling is the same sensation you have when you're drowning. That's what you're experiencing right now as you hear that type of. I mean, Brendan had asked me. He's like, the media didn't seem to learn anything, and you can't. The media is never going to learn anything. The media is not in a position to learn anything. They're not interested in learning that thing. The media is there to make money. And there are undoubtedly individuals in every organization that are going like, hey, wait a second, shouldn't we be paying more attention to this and that? Like, I don't even know what that guy from NPR was referring to. Like, it's. I suppose there is room on a 24-hour cable channel to say, as an individual, this guy's really interesting, but they didn't even get to that. Like, all they talked about was like he was like Game of Thrones.
Well, that's what was cool is that she came on and she was like, hey, this has been tremendously stupid and empty-headed. And then Chuck Todd did the weird, like, I don't even think people in Iowa care about their basic needs anymore. And then she came on and she was just like, wait for it. Wait for it. It's Game of Thrones.
I think there may be a point, and I don't know. I would want to talk to people who are actually on the ground in Iowa, and I don't know if this is the case. But it may be the case that the media is no longer paying attention to those issues. I don't know if the candidates, when they're going into Iowa, are talking about those things. I would be surprised if they were not. I mean,
I'm saying I think
Elizabeth Warren
people still care about that is my point, even if it's getting less attention. I think people
that's what I'm
still
saying.
care.
The media may not be following it as much, but when candidates go into these rooms in Iowa, I suspect they're getting those questions. Certainly, Elizabeth Warren came out with a very ambitious agricultural
it's just
proposal.
Interesting, though. You know, it's not like Game of Thrones.
But look, no, I get that part. But it's even like if you're going to do that type of coverage, what is it? That is, what are the personal attributes? I think what the guy from NPR was saying is that he's gay and married to has a same-sex marriage. I think.
And military.
And military. And I guess maybe that is perceived by Americans as being somehow at odds with each other. I guess to a certain extent, because for a long time you were not allowed to be gay in the military. And that may be compelling on the Democratic side. I also, what's interesting too, and no one seems to be saying, is that yes, he's a small town mayor. Barack Obama had a year or two of federal Senate, but was barely before he started to run. Prior to that, he was a state senator. So he has some executive, experience. But what's interesting is that we've yet to head into the debate when you have so many people who are talking about electability as to whether the fact that he's married to a man, whether we like it or not, is a liability in a general election. Like one of the, we are only a decade out from when the Republican Party, I guess by the time this election, it'll be closer to almost 15 years, used gay marriage as a driver of their electorate. And the empty seat on the Supreme Court, certainly the evangelicals who came out ostensibly to attack Roe v. Wade, it wasn't that long ago before there was, completely praised city clerk in, somewhere in Kentucky who was refusing to marry people. But it's interesting that is what is, and maybe, maybe the country, that would be great if the country had moved past this. It's going to be fascinating to see if he continues to rise in the polls and can sort of like continue to where he's at, if what happens with that thing. And also, I'm interested in hearing more about his policies. Like he's implied that wants to get rid of the Electoral College. I think that's good because it gives you a slight sense of like, what the issue sets are. But I haven't heard a lot of specifics in terms of policy. But
the specifics are he's going to change the tone and bring everyone together with tone.
Well, I mean,
there's a lot of people in the Democratic Party who want that. Yes. That is the reality.
He's also skeptical of universal higher ed for reasons of that's not going to cure inequality sort of thing.
Right, but that's like, you can be skeptical of certain proposals, but really what you should be doing if you want to be the proposal person is to offer a proposal. Like I can tell you this, Barack Obama won Iowa. There's multiple reasons probably why he did. Part of it was because he had implied and maybe promised some serious reform in terms of agriculture policy that he never delivered on to Iowans. But the other big thing was, I can't remember how many weeks out it was. Maybe it was 3 or 4 weeks. There was a debate, and he referred to Social Security being in crisis, which it is not. It was not in crisis then. It is not in crisis now. The fix of it is super easy. It's no more in crisis than any other budget in the line item in the budget. It's just a question of whether we're going to fund it. But he brought up Social Security being in crisis. And the idea that he identified a problem that seniors were very concerned about. They weren't concerned that Social Security was in crisis, but they're concerned about Social Security. The idea that he brought up a problem in Social Security indicated to people, older people in Iowa, that he cares about something that I care about. And they voted for him on that basis, when in fact, he was basically starting down the road to cut Social Security by cutting the cost of living adjustments. So people have to be very careful. Now, people who listen to this program, I suspect, are going to be a little bit more specific in what their needs are. So here's one where we're seeing that in I guess this was just today, in Iowa, he's calling for a tax credit allowance for childcare.
Exciting.
Now, my understanding is there is a tax deduction at this point for childcare. And a tax credit, I think, is an even, is actually more one-to-one as opposed to you can actually take that off of your taxes. So it is a marginal improvement. Of course, it does not help you if you are not paying that much in taxes, as it were, because you're not making much. But again, it's one of those sort of like, he mentioned, like, we may need some radical change. That is not the radical change. But the tone sounds nice. And I want to give credit where credit is due for that.
I'm just happy I can cancel my trip to the Drone Music Festival now. because the news segment we just watched, like the level of the Zen Cohen like level of hollowness that I just witnessed. I don't know how my soul could leave my body anymore, no matter how many drones I listen to or how many drugs I take. So
don't insult
Thank
Tim
you.
Collins, please, though. Everything else, fair point. It's interesting how the lane he's in used to be very heavy on showing how clever and policy driven they are, and now it's sort of shifted.
Well, the people are trying to find where they're entering, and he,
Right.
he is offering that sort of like, I have the on one hand I have the safety of being a white male, because there's some people who are convinced that a woman cannot win in this environment and that a person of color cannot win in this environment. I'm not as clear. I'm not as convinced, frankly. But then he also offers like I think the desire for folks on the left to have some type of social cultural progress, that as a gay man, he provides. And I think there's a sense on the left, that like broad left, that, and because he's a military man, he's going to sort of like offset the potential downsides. And it's quite possible.
Yeah, don't worry, he's not one of those gays.
Yeah, he's not.
He's not trying to like abolish the bourgeois family or anything. It's funny people harp on his sexuality, because I don't even perceive him as having a sexuality. Like I picture like a spreadsheet of tax credits where his genitals should be.
Well, I mean, I bet that is not, I mean, I think that's probably not a coincidence. I mean, I think that he probably, I would imagine, growing up, probably was not terribly confident about being out. Certainly as a politician, I don't think he was confident about being out. I can't imagine in the military he was terribly, confident about going out.
It will be fun, though, to see him get the same treatment that the right gave to Obama. Like, Obama was portrayed as this, like, terrifying, angry black man separatist or whatever, when he was just like a very nerdy normal person. I feel like the same thing's going to happen to Pete Buttigieg if he stays in the game,
Right. Oh yeah, they're going to be talking about how he's secretly wearing chaps under his suit or something, and he's just going to go to San Francisco.
The real plan is
or maybe they'll do something like this, as was spotted in Iowa, where 3 protesters dressed up like Pete Buttigieg and Jesus and I guess the devil, and this guy being Buttigieg was whipping Jesus on the cross as the devil is cheering him on. Play this. It's just insane.
Signs all over hell. Yes, beat your savior, beat him. I hate this guy. Yes, more blood, Peter. Every vote is a lash on the back of Christ. Your pay grade is going to be great. We have a place for you, Peter. You have no idea how important you are to us. Yes, yes, yes.
Oh my God.
I had no idea that people like that were so creative.
Was he wearing a lavalier mic?
Dude,
it sounds like it, doesn't it?
The guy playing the devil is so in character.
Is that David Cross in that devil costume?
The outfit is totally convincing. Jesus is just taking it. Oh, that's awesome.
I
guess new character in the works.
What's that?
Like, it's time to end the nuclear family.
Right.
Bring the Folsom
The
Street Fair
important thing
to
is
the White
that
House lawn.
when you are tearing apart the family, you do it with a tone that doesn't freak people out.
There's a lot. We tell people like, hey, mommy and daddy, not only is it okay for mommy and mommy to live together and raise a family, mommy and daddy can't live together anymore. That's going to freak a lot of people out. So we need to do it in a gradual way.
This is Tressie McMillan Cotton, who we had on this program not too long ago, right? Was this a vacation show? Yeah. Folks, if you haven't heard this interview with Tressie McMillan Cotton, Tressie McMillan Cotton, go back and listen to it. I can't remember the date. We'll have it in a moment. But she was talking about for-profit colleges and why Wall Street exacerbated this problem. I've mentioned on this program many times in the past that if you were to go look at like an ETF, electronically traded or whatever EFT, it's basically a fund of, you can look at a fund for just about every industry, but one for-profit colleges. You will see a slow drop over the course of the last Obama administration, when they started to really crack down. They basically said there are certain colleges or certain accreditors that we will no longer recognize. And because for-profit colleges make 90% of their revenue, at least, off of student loans provided by the government, if the government, as the first lender, says we will not lend to students who go to a university that is accredited by certain accreditation companies because they're not legit. And it caused, I think, ITT and one others to basically go bankrupt because they were not real in terms of what they were providing their students. You can see like a slow drop in the value of these for-profit universities, and literally 24 hours after Donald Trump is elected, they shoot up like a rocket. And many of these institutions are picked up 100% in their valuation on the stock market over the past couple of years. But here is Tressie McMillan Cotton. And I think she's testifying to Elizabeth Warren. This is the Senate. I'm not sure which committee this is, but let's listen to it.
You've also written about what turbocharged the rapid growth of for-profits over the past couple of decades. Wall Street. That Wall Street investors and shareholders, always on the prowl for the next moneymaker, realized that for-profit colleges were a gold mine because in our system of weak accountability, which Dr. Looney was referring to just a minute ago, as long as they kept enrolling more and more students, especially low-income students, more and more federal aid dollars would flow straight into their pockets. Since for-profit colleges are, by definition, the only colleges allowed to make gobs of money that can be pulled out of the school and distributed to owners, to shareholders, and to Wall Street investors without strong federal accountability, what market incentives do for-profits have to deliver a high-quality education at a low price?
Oh, at a low price. Well, there you did complicate the question, Senator Warren. So there is a market incentive, to be fair, that students can vote with their feet, is what we say. That if students do not get a good education, that they can just not enroll, and that is supposed to be the market feedback loop. That again takes for granted that those students have other choices. So one thing that I have learned is that poor students and women of color have gotten the message. We have done a wonderful job over the last 25 years of a public messaging campaign that says that everyone needs to go to college, that everyone needs some post-secondary education. It has been extremely successful. What has been less successful is that we have not met the success of that message with a plethora of high-quality institutional choices for all students. And so in the gap, what happens is that the market takes advantage of the fact that our messaging takes care of a lot of the quality branding problems for higher education and for for-profit colleges. And so that student voting with their feet option is not nearly as practical as perhaps we would like for it to be. And so other than the student voting with their feet, the market doesn't have many incentives to offer for keeping costs low, because the point is to maximize, of course, the difference between the cost of instruction and the price of tuition. And so there are not many.
I appreciate this. You know, I just want to say, Mr. Chairman, I really worry that we've got this entirely backwards. We tell people, especially women, low-income people, people of color, that the only way to get ahead is a college diploma. We watch accreditors rubber stamp the schools that are giving out those degrees. We pour billions of dollars in federal money into those schools, no matter how poorly they educate their students. And then we let Wall Street get in on the gravy train by raking in the cash from these outfits. So we ultimately ask for money back with interest, not from colleges, not from the employers, but from the students, with no regard to whether or not they got a return on their investment. And
So I mean, this is it's largely a scam, and people who are stuck in a position that they feel they are precluded from moving forward in their profession because they lack a degree, get sucked into a lot of these programs. And there's just simply, these programs do not offer the data to establish that it's worth it. There are some programs I've heard that are actually, that seem to me to be okay, that they defer the cost of the tuition to and narrow your responsibility to pay back to the delta between what you were earning and what you ultimately end up earning after you graduate. But those type of programs are few and far between. The real moneymakers, and these are big companies. They are big corporations making a lot of money. They are publicly traded corporations, are basically geared towards selling the idea that this will help you without any data to that effect, and just holding people over until they get their second installment of their loan. It's super messed up. And this was something actually that the Obama administration was doing quite well on in the second term. And they knew the day after Donald Trump got in, because Donald Trump is a Republican. And the Republican Party, if there is really any genuine, heartfelt policy at the heart of their policy program, it is to take public money and put it in the hands of private entities. And that's what this is about. Lastly, one of the other prominent features of Republican politics is to make it harder for people to vote, particularly people who are black or brown to vote. And in Tennessee, they've come up with a really new, innovative way of inhibiting new voters from voting. And that is to introduce severe penalties, not just civil, but criminal penalties. If you go out and you're an organization that goes out and registers people, you submit these registrations to the Secretary of State through local election boards and whatnot, and they vet them. They vet these registrations, and in this instance, if they find that if you have deficient signatures or addresses, right? Anywhere from 100 to 500 deficient voter registration applicants. So maybe they're incomplete. Hey, you didn't put your full address here. Or maybe it's incorrect information. You don't live here anymore. There are times, I'm sure, when you hire people, they go out and they say, oh yeah, I got, look at all these voters I registered, and they filled it in themselves. Or maybe people come up and they lie to you. Or maybe you just messed up. You could be hit with fines from $150 to $2,000. If you submit more than 500 deficient forms, a fine of up to $10,000. And violating any of those rules intentionally and knowingly would constitute a Class A misdemeanor, which is this most serious misdemeanor. And if you listen, we had that Tressie McMillan Cotton, I think was in the week of January 23rd. Around that time, we also had a interview with a professor about misdemeanors. Misdemeanors does not mean what you think it means. You can go to jail for up to almost 12 months and get a fine of $2,500, criminal charges. And this legislation just passed the Tennessee House Republicans passed HB 1079, which is 6 months after the Tennessee Black Voter Project registered 90,000 new voters. And so there was some protests. Let's hear some.
Keep voter registration legal. Keep voter registration legal.
They are attempting to.
Because of the efforts in 2018. The last thing our legislators want to see is a group of African American people inspiring other black and brown communities registered to vote.
Keep voter registration legal.
I was told by both the election commissioners in Nashville and in Memphis that all forms had to be turned in. And now he is using that as a way to penalize our efforts.
Keep voter registration legal. Right now. Keep voter registration legal.
Voter registration legal.
HB 1079 is modern day voter suppression.
The other party has a lot of pressure to vote for voter suppression. We should always keep voter registration legal. It's one of the worst bills that's been presented in the legislature this year.
To be clear, what that woman was saying is that when you get these forms, some of these entities will go through them and find like, oh, we've left the address blank here. Or, oh, there's no phone number. Or, oh, this is not the right zip code. Or, this looks suspicious. The Secretary of State told them to hand in all the forms, despite any flaws that they saw on the forms, so that they could come in and say, look at how many forms are flawed that they submitted. So this was a complete setup in that regard. But this is perfectly consistent with what we know of the Republican Party, from lawmakers in states to lawmakers on a federal level to the federal judiciary and the Supreme Court. All right, got time for just a couple of IMs, and I don't think we're going to have any more time for the calls. I'm sorry, folks. Apologize for that. I love Sarah Palin. Sam, can you please apologize for your comments about the Jewish people and vaccinations in the opening of the show? Saying Jewish people have diseases is a common anti-Semitic trope. To slightly disagree with Dayen's point, I'd say the establishment Democrats suffer from more of a confluence of having no ideology and intellectual capture. We need less of these career-oriented corporate ladder-climbing mini Brett Kavanaugh types, in the sense I played the game right, so I deserve this types, in lieu of more activists and consumer advocates. I mean, that's the weird thing. I don't think that a guy like Primus, maybe he's feeling his oats, but it's not. Doesn't look like he's converting that into after the course of 30 years into corporate sinecure. Maybe he will after this. I don't know, but. Bernie needs to do automatic voter registration so we can all primary these people out of here. When people on the lower rungs of the economic ladder vote less, obviously the Democratic side of Congress is going to track more to the right, and I'm a capitalist. Jez Gargelet, here's something I haven't heard Bernie or you address. Getting rid of private insurance will unemploy at least 1 million people directly, plus all the software developers, et cetera, that are involved in the industry, plus all the shareholders who will lose money on the healthcare companies that are put out of business. The massive disruption could be ameliorated by a very long transition period, but that shrinks the savings in the near term. Bernie makes it sound like the switch could happen tomorrow, even if the Dems had every branch of government. So right now I fear, well, okay. First off, I don't think that we need to get rid of private insurance. I have said this, multiple times. I also don't think that your numbers are accurate, because we're going to have an insurance program. The number of people you will need to administer the program is going to be, more or less the same. You will not need the executives. Yes, that's true. Will shareholders lose money? Yes, that's true. We face the same problem with fossil fuels, frankly. There is no doubt that there are going to be losers in this situation, and they are going to be insurance companies. This insurance company that is making $200 billion a year in revenue, which just back of the envelope means that they're, probably clearing anywhere from $10 to $40 billion in profits per year. Maybe it's less. Maybe it's only 6. Maybe it's 8. Yes, they're going to lose money. There's no doubt about it. There are people who are going to lose money. There's also going to be, on the other side of that, a huge boon to companies that no longer have to. They're going to get more in taxes, but they're not going to have to spend their time being a health insurance company. There's going to be a huge boon to individuals in terms of, like, we're just talking about sheer productivity, because they're going to be freed up just in terms of the hours that they spend, in terms of administering their health insurance. There's going to be boons to folks because they're going to be able to feel like they can go out and maybe build that new company because they're not as concerned, both in terms of their own health care and cost of health care for other people. I mean, there's a lot of benefits here that I think we're going to see. Look, undoubtedly, there was people who lost money when we made lead in gasoline illegal. I mean, this is, there's no doubt. And, we can argue about the transition period. And I imagine if Bernie Sanders would become president, he would not be able to impose this. It would end up being something that would get negotiated with the House and the Senate. And, but I think every candidate out there, even the ones who, got out and say, I'm going to bring Republicans and Democrats together, they're all being a little bit hyperbolic, and they're all saying this is an aspiration, and that is their starting point.
But also, Bernie's plan, I'm pretty sure it does have a provision for transitioning people who could be hurt by losing their jobs in the insurance industry. I think that's true. Also, he wants to pair this with a universal jobs guarantee, don't forget. So unless someone is like really in love with working for the insurance industry, I'm pretty sure the thing they like about it is that it's a decent job, and there will be other decent jobs waiting for them.
A Square. Majority Report these last 2 weeks feels like we're moving to another level of the deconstruction of the administrative state and the alignment of all these fascists around the world, with Bibi being reelected. It's even more depressing. Mike, thanks for covering that a few weeks ago. Sam, loved that interview yesterday. Glad you covered that BS about grit and how it's used in the so-called education reform. I read the article on innovation he published in the Jacobin. Recommended reading for everyone toiling in the corporate fields. Congressional baseball fan. There's likely to be a large hole in the Democrats' 2019 team roster this year, with both Tim Ryan and Eric Swalwell out campaigning. Any ideas on filling the Tim and Erica hole? Play ball. Burrs Durding. Sam, I'm a guy who rides the bus. Yeah, I'm the type of guy who rides the bus. I talk to the worker types on the bus because I think I ride the bus, They don't like immigrants because they think those jobs are their jobs and they should be there, and immigrants shouldn't. How do we appeal to these people? I ride the bus with them, Hank. FYI, the Pete Peterson Foundation is a major donor to CAP. Yeah. Depressive regressive. Jimmy Dore is leaving TYT and going on tour. Should we heckle in his shows? Also, there's video. There's video on the Stop and Shop Union website of them sneaking meat in unrefrigerated personal cars into the stores. Oh, gross. Ew. Local pizza historian, where's Mindy when you need her? I'm at work, so I can't just shout F off, you effing idiot. She's an effing refugee. Well, she came on. She didn't do that for you, but came close. Disco Stu, you guys are missing the point on Trump's sanctuary city gambit. He's doing the same thing he did when ICE was dropping large groups of migrants at churches, making a backdrop for propaganda. He's banking on images of thousands of scary brown people in cities will juice his base turnout. Some straight Goebbels shit. Dr. Chaos, MD, when promoting the idea of Medicare for all, why don't I hear a talking point around the fact that private insurance companies can hike their rates whenever they feel like it? But under a Medicare for all system, those premiums would essentially be converted to taxes, which would be lower than what most Americans are paying now. And most importantly, an act of Congress would be required to raise those taxes. That's a good point. The static quality of taxes. But yeah, I think Bernie's making that point that you're going to pay less. Morella, thanks for the Gramsci discussion with the great Professor Wolf. It was awesome. Interesting to hear considering what is happening to the Italian left. Sam's Tinder profile. Hey, girl, swipe right, and I'll show you my two-step plan for the floor, to both dance and the house. Attorney Andrew, so apparently Amy Klobuchar is now doing a Fox News town hall after Bernie. This should make Bernie's decision to go look bad as starting a precedent, or B, prepare my cyanide for what will surely be the worst hour of television in the 2020 race.
Go with B.
Looking forward to it.
That actually might be really
not
funny.
that big of a deal.
It really doesn't matter, but we might get some funny clips out of it.
Jay Tingle, Carrick effed Judith Ringett on hallowed ground. You called him a former felon. Was he pardoned as well? Lead still used in airplane fuel. Thank you, Jay. Street Legal. Do you remember when Bush wanted Carrick to be the ruler of Iraq, but instead he was arrested and police headquarters was named because even the NYPD realized what an F-stick he was? Chris from Canada. After the Bernie town hall, I want to see how much more income tax I pay as a Canadian than if I would if I were American. I used Atlanta, Georgia as a random city to live in. I make $57,000 a year. The difference in total income tax paid is $2,500 annually. Does the average American pay more than $2,500 annually for premiums, deductibles, and copays? I mean,
I'm above that.
Like,
yes.
Never mind. I mean, it's significantly more than that, I think. All right, two more. Winnipeg Craig. Alberta's election last night was a bit of a Kobayashi Maru for the left. After the Providence two right-wing parties merged, a victory for the United Conservative Party was almost certain. They did, and the NDP dropped to opposition status. UCP leader Jason Kenney's victory speech started with a claim that Alberta was open for business, included calling out foreign-funded special interest environmental groups, something American environmentalists need to keep their eyes on. In terms of silver lining, the centrist party for Alberta and were completely obliterated and ended up with 0 seats, even though the NDP lost. They had the second best results they've ever had in the province by a mile, and now are the clear and only opposition to the United Conservative Party. Bad result, but the dismantling of the center is going to be a position the NDP well for the next cycle. Silver linings. DX Fool, hi Sam. Hi folks, shalom from the Bay Area. You may have noticed my M's lately have been infrequent. Well, I've been caring for my elderly mom who had a major accident last June and has been declined ever since. I'm sorry to hear that. But the pace accelerated the last few weeks. She got more senile and accident prone, finally went to the hospital. She passed away on April 1st, just 2 minutes after her brother arrived from Orange County. Her remains arrived in Honolulu last night for last week's funeral. Her last votes were Obama and Clinton. Before your Pesach break, could you blow a shofar as a final send-off to the afterlife? Thanks. Have a nice vacation in Peaches. Will do. I'm very sorry for your loss.
Sorry.
And the final IM of the day, CTMR fan. So, MR crew, please let people know that the Stop and Shop workers are picketing from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. I brought them donuts and coffee. Please tell people to show their support.
Do something.
See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,